morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hope you're all doing well this fine Friday. It's a little bit chilly here today, and we're maybe going to get some rain later. I think the ground needs it. Anyhow, I'm here to talk Karen Reid again. There's no trial until Tuesday, so I thought it would be a good idea to take this opportunity to review the medical examiner stuff. I kind of left this when she was on the stand, Dr. Scotty Bello. Kind of left this and the discussion about hypothermia that I wanted to do. And I was going to save it until the defence case. However, seeing as we've got a little bit of a lull and we've got the time, I'm going to do it today. So we're going to review Dr. Scotty Bello's testimony. I'm not going to play it all the way through because it was pretty long. I'm just going to focus on the bits particularly pertaining to the autopsy. There was a long introduction from Hank and a long explanation about what an autopsy is. I don't think we need that. I think Scotty Bello is a professional. She does have the qualifications, unlike Shannon Burgess. She is actually qualified. And we all know what an autopsy is. So we're going to start from the external examination, and we're going to start there and work our way through. And the bits of the cross-examination that are relevant in relation to hypothermia. I'm not really sure why the defence are really working from the premise that John didn't have hypothermia. I guess it's, you know, if they say he absolutely does not have hypothermia, then he wasn't out long enough, or he was put outside when he was already dead. And actually, he was stored inside. I guess that's where they're going with it. But I do think there are some hypothermic changes to John's body. And I think he was outside the whole time. I don't think he was at the flagpole the whole time, but I do think he was outside the whole time. But that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. Let's say a couple of hellos before we get into it. Hello, Angie, baby. We got Kimberly. We got Lady Luck. We got Teresa. We got Queen of Ravens on the replay crew today. Hello to everyone on the replay crew. You're very welcome. Got Two Arctic Wolves, Down Under with Love. We got CW, Melissa, Tessa. We got Jenniferius. That's a cool name. That's a cool name. Oh dear, roped into taking my mother-in-law shopping. Oh, that's not good. And we've got the Professor of Mathematics and Science. All right, we're going to get straight into this. So without further ado, let's join Hank Brennan as he begins his direct examination of Dr. Scotty Bello and the description of the external examination. This is from day 16. So the link is in the description box, but day 16. All right, let's go, shall we?
Yeah, just need an understanding. Yeah.
With the court's permission, Ms. Gilman, if you could put up the diagram, full body. Could enlarge that a little more. Thank you very much. Could you explain this to us?
Yes, this is the diagram that we use during every autopsy. As you can see, we note the name of the decedent. Every case has its own number. In this case, it was 22-1697. And then we take note of, as I mentioned, during the external examination, physical characteristics such as hair, eyes, teeth. And then on this diagram, we would note any scars we see on the body, any tattoos we see on the body, any injuries we see on the body, and any therapeutic interventions. Those would be things that are sometimes done either by emergency medical personnel or at the hospital. Everything would be noted on this diagram.
Now, if you could take us through, I'm going to ask you, we'll go body part by body part, if that's okay. I'm going to ask you to begin with Mr. O'Keefe's face, the front of his face. And if you could enlarge that, Ms. Gilman, thank you very much. Did you notice any injuries on Mr. O'Keefe's face? And if so, could you, I think there's a pointer available for you, doctor. If you could point out on the diagram what you observed.
So on the diagram, well, first of all, there was medical intervention on Mr. O'Keefe that included an endotracheal tube that had been placed to help him breathe. But once all the intervention, all the medical devices were removed, I observed on his right upper eyelid a 1 centimeter laceration. So as we're looking at the diagram, this is the right side and this is the left side. So on his right eyelid, there was a small laceration.
Okay, so a small laceration to his right eye. Now, the brain surgeon who spoke Wednesday that we reviewed yesterday, he said that was not caused due to him falling backwards. You're not going to get a laceration to the front of your face by falling backwards, are you? So it's still up in the air about what that laceration was caused by.
I also observed abrasions on the anterior and the left aspect of the nose. So the nose would be here on the front and the left aspect. Abrasions are scrapes. Lacerations are tears in the skin. I should probably explain that.
So to the left side of his nose, there were some abrasions. So some damage to the left side of his nose. Again, if he'd fallen backwards and hit his head, which is what likely caused these skull fractures, as we discussed yesterday, he wouldn't have abrasions to the left side of his nose, would he? I mean, unless he was like rolling around. You know, he fell backwards, hit his head, and then was rolling around, I guess. But we do have to be acutely aware that he did have some injuries on his face that could have been caused by being punched. And then that caused him to lose his balance and fall backwards.
Then there was some bleeding and some swelling of the eyelids of both eyes.
So that probably is pertaining to the blood that was building up behind his eyes. That's from the bleeding in his brain, because the blood has to go somewhere. So it tries to find a way out, and that's where the raccoon eyes develop from.
Does that complete your analysis?
For the front of the face, correct, yes.
Now, Karen, in one of her many media interviews, she shot herself in the foot so many times, honestly, but she said she pulled a piece of glass from his nose, and that caused blood to stream down his face. I'm not seeing that, honestly. Like, if he's already dead, he's not going to have blood, like, coming out of a wound. Is he? So I don't know what she's talking about, really, but that's what she said in an interview, just for those who say, well, the nose issue was to do with glass. Now, how did he get glass in his nose? Was it from the cocktail glass? Doesn't mean to say that the cocktail glass broke when he was struck by a vehicle, does it?
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm showing you a photograph. Do you recognize in that photograph?
Yes.
But didn't the neurosurgeon say loss of functionality was immediate after hitting his head, so no rolling around? Yeah, most likely. Most likely. He would lose consciousness. So he wouldn't die, but he would lose consciousness. You can get involuntary movements, though. and there may have been a short period of time before he completely lost consciousness. So it's possible. I don't think he was rolling around. I don't, but I'm just, considering all possibilities.
Yes, this is a photograph of Mr. O'Keefe's face.
Does that photograph depict any of the observations or injuries you made that you just described to the jury?
Yes, it shows the small laceration that I noted during the autopsy on the right eyelid. You can see some of the swelling and some of the bleeding over his eyelids, and that's pretty much all I can see because it's a side view.
Is there an apparatus?
There is what we call an endotracheal tube, as well as a C collar or a C stabilization collar. That's something that would have been placed on him by medical personnel.
All right, this is the evidence and ask for instruction.
Okay. All right. So, folks, during the testimony of Dr. Scorti-Bello, photos will be introduced to you. They're photographs of John O'Keefe that Dr. Scorti-Bello from the autopsy. So you'll have them in the jury room with you. I'll put them in an envelope, or I'll ask that they be put in an envelope. So if you don't want to look at them now, you don't have to. At some point, we'd ask that you make sure you look at it. These photos are not pleasant, and you may find that they're graphic. But what's important for you to know is that your verdict must not in any way be influenced by the fact that these photographs may be unpleasant or graphic. The defendant is entitled to a verdict based solely on the evidence and not based on pity or sympathy for Mr. O'Keefe, which might be occasioned by these photographs. So consider the photographs only as they draw your attention to a clinical, medical status, or to the nature of Mr. O'Keefe's injuries, or to the nature of the incident itself. So they'll be displayed up on the screen for you as well.
Okay, so we don't see the graphic photos. Thank you, the Quiet Observer, for the 10 Australian dollars. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Exhibit 156.
Thank you.
Ms. Gillen, could you show the jury? And doctor, can you point out the injuries you were describing by using the diagram, or when you were using the diagram?
So the laceration, the small laceration that I previously...
All right, I'm just going to move us on a couple of minutes because she explains the face again.
Defibrillator pads on the body, and there was an abrasion.
So we're talking about the body, the torso now.
That's very commonly seen in people who have undergone resuscitation. Internally, that abrasion and the whole resuscitation apparatus was associated with some anterior rib fractures, which are also seen in cases of resuscitation, but I didn't make any other notes in terms of trauma on the chest or abdomen.
So absolutely no damage other than what was accrued during the medical treatment, like broken ribs were due to resuscitation attempts. That's very, very, very common because, doing resus is strenuous, it's arduous for the people doing it, but it's also arduous on the victim's body as well. So rib fractures are very common. So not caused by a collision. For anybody go, oh, he had broken ribs, that's because he was hit by a car. No, it wasn't. These broken ribs are absolutely characteristic of resuscitation. There was no bruising, no cuts, nothing to his torso that would indicate him being struck by a motor vehicle. Nothing.
To move to the arms and the hands, if we could come down just a little bit. Let's begin with Mr. O'Keefe's hand or hands. Did you make any observations regarding Mr. O'Keefe's hand or hands?
Yes. On his upper right arm, I noted that he had a superficial abrasion. So it would have been, you can
we move that down a little bit?
Move it down a little bit. Yeah, thank you. Seem to be doing a very good job. Okay, somehow doesn't want to.
Sorry if that's not working well.
It's projecting here, but not on the actual picture.
There may be a second pointer.
I can do it here.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So on the right upper medial arm, that would be the inner side of his arm, there was a superficial abrasion. Again, that's a scrape. Then on his right posterior arm and forearm, so not exactly on this aspect of the arm, but on the back side of the arm, which would be in the back of the diagram, there were multiple abrasions, which I described as ranging from 2 to 3 millimeters and up to 7 centimeters. Then, yeah, if you could move the diagram down, please. Again, there is a back to this diagram. I don't know if you could put that on the screen. There we go. So this is now the right side, and this is the left. I noted that there were 2 bruises on the back of his right hand, also a faint scratch on the back of his left hand. And then moving down to the lower extremities or the legs, if you could please show the front, there was a small abrasion, a small scrape on the side of his right knee.
Hey, approach your arm.
So zero injuries to his back, to his butt, nothing. So if the grass stains that Hank pointed out on the jeans the other day had been caused by him hitting the deck, one, it would have broken his fall, so likelihood he would never have had a fractured skull. Even if he'd been hit by a motor vehicle and landed on his butt, it would have broken his fall, so he wouldn't have had a fractured skull. Even if he did fall backwards after, it would have just broken the fall completely. And he would have had bruising at the very, very least. If you fall with force onto your butt, you got your tailbone and you got the you know, those little bones at the bottom of your spine. You're going to break something there. At the very least, you're going to have some bruising, even if you're lucky enough not to break anything. So no, he didn't fall on his butt with any force. I think either those grass stains come from him being dragged, or they come from him maybe being in a seated position for a while. Let's say, for example, he was punched, he fell backwards, smacked his head on a wall, and then slid down. Maybe he was left in a seated position for a while, maybe in some kind of muddy, well, it wouldn't be muddy, would it? The ground would be frozen, but maybe on some grass or something that would have given him some marks. And then at a later time, maybe an hour, 2, 3 hours later, he's moved and he's dragged along on his butt. So that's what I think happened.
Yes.
Dr. handing you a photograph. Do you recognize it from that photograph?
Yes.
What is it?
This is the back of Mr. O'Keefe's right hand, I believe.
That's fair and accurate depiction of how his hand appeared when he was examined here.
Yes.
What is the evidence, please?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay.
158.
With the court's permission, I'd show P64.
Do we find these photos anywhere, or at least the model with the drawing? I don't get why that couldn't show a drawing. The photos of his right arm are available. There's a couple of different angles of the right arm that's available. I don't know about the rest of the autopsy photos, though. The autopsy report itself has never been released. I want to, if I can get my hands on the autopsy report, I'll do a video reviewing it, but it's not been released to my knowledge anyway.
7 to the jury. And could you explain, you said there were 2 bruises. Could you point those out for us?
All right. So for anybody saying, oh, look, you can see the bruising on his back. No, you can't. That's lividity. That's the purplish reddish blotches you get when you've died, and because your heart is no longer pumping, then just by force of gravity, all the blood goes to the lowest point. So if you're laid on your back, then you're going to get lividity on your back side. So down your back of your legs. There is a point, I think it takes several hours for the blood to congeal like fully. So if you moved, let's say, for example, I don't know how many hours it is. I should know, but I don't. But let's say you've been lying in the same position for, let's say, 12 hours, and then you moved, the blood will stay where it was. So it's a good indicator for a medical examiner if the lividity is in a place that's not consistent with the position the body was found in, then that's a very good indicator that that body has been moved after death and been moved for like a while after death. Whereas if you, let's say, move the body within 2 hours, you're still going to get some blood movement. So you'll have the lividity in the place where the body was originally laid, and then after it's been moved, you might get some movement, so some lividity in another area as well. But this is not bruising, this is lividity. Yeah. And you also see it on his legs. There's a photo of his legs, and you see it on his legs. This is medical. You can tell that's medical. And also what we don't know is whether he had any minor abrasions on his body beforehand, before he died. We don't know that. It's very common to get minor abrasions or minor bruises, isn't it? You know, if you're busy and you might get a minor bruise and you don't even know how you got it. But that's definitely medical, that one there.
For us?
Yes, there's one here and one here.
Did you attempt to assess those, determine whether you could conclude or opine on a cause of those?
No, I did not. Well, I take that back. I'm sorry. So this particular one.
Wasn't he found on his left side? That's what Karen said. And then one of them, I don't know, it's Kerry or Jen, said that they rolled him over so that they could do resus. So they didn't find him on his back. But I've never had, we don't know exactly what position he was in. Like, he could have been on his right side, but like his back is still kind of on the ground. So he could have had his head tilted to the left and his legs tilted to the left, but his back actually still on the ground. We just don't know, because we just listening to people who were highly stressed, people who were not clear on what they were even looking at, and possibly at least one of them lying. So there's that.
Has two small little pinpoint defects in the middle, which we sometimes see when
Jen said they flipped him over. I know, which implies he was lying on his front. But we just don't know the actual truth.
emergency personnel tries to get access.
Wonder what the cold temperatures did to the effects of bruising and lividity, etc. Was that photo taken at the autopsy or in the hospital? This is autopsy photos, I think. However, lividity is not going to be affected by temperature, I don't think. Bruising does not happen after death. So if whatever bruises are on the body happens when you're alive, so you would have bruises that happened during whatever happened, whether it's a fight or what, would have would not be influenced by the cold temperatures. So probably minimal.
To a vein for fluids, for intravenous fluids. So, but I did not put that in my report. I just described it as a contusion.
Is it common to see that type of coloration where medical personnel put intravenous or other types of support into somebody's hand?
Yes, it's very common for the skin to bruise when someone tries to get access to a blood vessel.
The other coloration that is unrelated to those two small points, would you have a description of what those are?
No.
I'd also like to show you exhibit number 1. Exhibit number 1, please. Thank you. You use the word superficial. What does that mean?
Superficial means that the abrasion is on the superficial layers of the skin, usually the epidermis and sometimes the dermis, but there's no penetration of the skin.
When you're assessing to determine whether there's any penetration, do you measure the length of the wound, of the abrasion?
Penetration would be measuring the depth. If there was actual penetration, I would have to measure how deep into the skin. For example, when we assess stab wounds, we have to measure the depth of the wound. In this particular case, you can see that these are scrapes or scratches, and there's no exposed underlying fat or muscle. And therefore, to answer your question, I measured their length and gave a range, but I did not measure their depth.
And for those people thinking that dog bites go all the way down to the bone, they absolutely do not. Only in really, really extreme cases are you going to get a dog bite that is so bad, you're literally down to the bone. Most dog bites are very superficial and don't go any deeper than the dermis. So these are superficial dog bites and scratches. So they're claw marks. I'm going to say, I'll die on this hill and I'm going to say 100% these are dog bites. This is a dog attack. Not a serious dog attack, but it's a dog attack. Scratches from the front paws there. This, I'll come back to. These are scratches. There's a couple more. Actually. Maybe there's another one down there. But anyway, these are scratches. This is the bite here. So this is not one bite, though. This is probably 2 attempts. These are nips. I won't even go on to say that these are bites. These are nips. But you do have this bruising here, and this is bruising. So the red, purple is lividity, you can see, but this is an actual bruise. So these are the front teeth. So you've got canine, these are incisors, maybe. And then you've got this, which is from the lower jaw. But I think she's grabbed his elbow, not been able to connect, and then repositioned and nipped again. That's what I think we're seeing there. But we are actually seeing some bruising, which is very common with dog bite wounds when they're done, when the skin deep. So she's jumped up. So you've got one front paw, next front paw. She's repositioned and she's bitten, she's repositioned and she's nipped again. That's what I think we're seeing. Not a cocktail glass, not a tail light. This is a dog bite. 100%. I'll die on the hill.
As a routine practice during an autopsy, doctor, if there was penetration or depth, would you, as a routine, measure that?
I would make a note of it.
Are there any such notes in any of your autopsy findings or reports about depth?
No, I did not make a note on the depth of these ones.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to how?
Animal bites do hurt. I'll tell you the most painful bite I've ever had was from a gerbil. A little gerbil. When I was a kid. I got a new gerbil. I was training the gerbil. And the gerbil just flew at me and grabbed my finger and was hanging on. Literally hanging on. Literally. I was like holding my hand up, like screaming, and the gerbil is just hanging on to my finger. Ripped all the skin, like really went deep, proper deep. Like really ripped it open. It was really painful. Now I've had dog bites, but I've never had a serious dog bite. I got bit from a border collie once. And that was painful, but it wasn't as painful as a gerbil. But that was through a letterbox. Like I was delivering leaflets and I put my hand through the letterbox and the dog must have been asleep behind the door and like panicked and just jumped up and grabbed my hand. So I still got the scars. That was painful, but not as bad as the gerbil. I'm like, the gerbil on the end of my. I did train the gerbil though. Didn't do it again.
Those superficial abrasions occurred?
I do not.
And I asked you about the hand, which we just saw, and I should ask you the same question. Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty how that coloration, aside from medical intervention, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty how the other discoloration happened on Mr. O'Keefe's hand?
I can state to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that that's a bruise, a contusion, but I cannot tell you how it occurred.
And
well, maybe it was when he was defending himself that he got a bruise on his hand. So there's no other damage. All right, so we're going to move on. Actually, let's have a look at this leg before we move on to internal. Let's just have a look at this leg. So it's difficult to tell because of the lighting how, like, whether that's lividity up to there or whether that's just lighting. But he has a superficial mark on his right knee that Hank makes a big deal of. Oh, it's all on the right side. It's like, yeah, it could have come from anything. But we are going to move on to internal stuff now. So we're going to jump to 252. So they have quite a long break. So the only thing that I'm skipping over really is the discussion of the little bruise on his right leg and the broken ribs, which are due to medical. So 252. So we're back from break now.
thank you, Mr. Brennan. Doctor, I'm handing you a document. Do you recognize that?
Yes, this is the report of toxicology from
the
state.
Toxicology. I knew I had 252 for a reason. Toxicology. Listen to his blood alcohol. Listen to his blood alcohol in a minute.
Police crime lab for Mr. O'Keefe's autopsy.
Have you seen that document before?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of the report we saw before?
Yes.
All right, introduce this as the next exhibit, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. Exhibit 161.
What if he was holding glass, got punched, and he lifted his hand in self-defense, causing abrasions and cuts to face? Yeah, very possible. Very possible. Or if he goes through the back gate, Higgins is waiting for him. Chloe comes flying out, and he's now defending himself against Chloe. So if he's still holding the glass, then yeah, that's possibly how you've got small abrasions that relate to glass injuries. Did he vomit from the head hit or alcohol the night before? Don't know. We only heard about vomit from, it was from the EMTs, wasn't it? Have we actually heard that this year? I'm not sure we've heard it this year. I think we heard that in trial 1, that there was some vomit on his clothes. So we don't know what the circumstances were of causing him to vomit. Anybody find those socks yet? His socks are on his feet. There's a picture that was shown earlier on in the trial of John's legs, and he's got socks on. So his socks are on his feet. Now, it does look like his socks have been put on, like re-put on, because one of them's like not put on properly. But there's definitely, I can't remember what day it's from. It might have even been from this day. But it's definitely in this trial that they show a picture of his legs. And he's got socks on. Oh, it was during the testimony to do with his clothes. Like you could see the clothes on the floor, and then you just kind of got the bottom of his legs, and you saw his feet, and he's got socks on.
Thank
you.
In your experience, doctor, are you familiar what the toxicology report and the testing involves?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Are you familiar in your experience with what is involved in a toxicology test?
In general terms, yes.
And if you studied Mr. O'Keefe's toxicology report, was that important or part of your analysis in your ultimate conclusions?
It was one piece of evidence that I took into consideration, yes.
In the toxicology testing, is there a search to see if there are any type of drugs or medications in Mr. O'Keefe's blood?
Yes.
Okay. And was there any?
There were no prescription medications. There were no illicit drugs in his system.
In a toxicology, is there also a testing for blood alcohol content?
Yes.
What is the difference between ethanol in heart blood and ethanol under 1102?
In vitreous humor?
Yes.
So we usually submit multiple specimens for toxicology. Some of the specimens are used for screening of classes of different drugs, and then other specimens are used to confirm, the presence and quantify a particular drug. So in this particular case, the lab tested the heart blood, which showed that it had an ethanol level of 0.21 grams per deciliter. And they also tested the vitreous, which is the fluid that sits behind the eyeball. And in that specimen, the ethanol was slightly higher at 0.28.
Thank you, doctor.
So very high blood alcohol content. So between 0.21 and 0.28. Now, Karen, when she was tested the following morning, her blood alcohol was it 0.09, which they was it 0.09 or 0.07, but they rewound it like 9 hours, to work out what her blood alcohol content might have been at 12:45. And they gave a wide range because they can't do this assessment like very well, because it depends on your metabolism and But John's alcohol was as high, or if not higher, than Karen's highest assessment. Now you might say, well, what does that matter? Because John wasn't driving, Karen was driving. That's absolutely true. My point, though, is that John would have been very drunk, because that's between 0.21 and 0.28. That was at autopsy. If John was lying unconscious for several hours, his body is metabolizing the alcohol. Yeah. Even if you're unconscious, you're still going to be metabolizing stuff. So what his blood alcohol content would have been at 12:30, likely to have been considerably higher than 0.2. So he was very drunk, and he might be like all these people in Canton. They need an intervention for the entire town. All of these people seem to just be drinking constantly, even when they're police officers and even when they're on the job. But John will not have been making good decisions. Even if he was very functional, he would not have been making good decisions. So if Brian Higgins, let's say, for example, challenged him, he's not going to have backed down, is he? He's going to be, all right, let's go. And he's not going to be thinking through his actions. So let's say, for example, Brian Higgins is waiting at that back gate, you know, that side gate that takes you into the backyard. John's not going to think, oh, no, I'm going in the house. I'm going in the house, chat to people. I'm not going to come and chat to you in the backyard. I'm going in the house where it's warm. He's not going to be thinking like that, is he? So if he's challenged at some point when he gets out the car to go into the backyard or to go down the basement even, he's not going to be thinking it through. So he's going to walk into a trap. And I don't believe that anybody at 34 Fairview actually wanted to kill him. I think Brian Higgins was mad and he wanted a confrontation. I don't think he wanted to kill John O'Keefe. I don't think it was that kind of trap. But I think things got out of hand. I think John fell during the course of an altercation. Chloe bit him and they panicked. They didn't do the right thing. They panicked. And I think they left him. And I think the reason why Jen McCabe did that search was because once she became aware of what had happened, and John was like maybe outside in the backyard and they just left him, she panicked and made that search. How long does it take to die in the cold? So my theory fits all the little points. Doesn't mean to say that's what happened. It's just trying to make sense of everything. I just want to pop back to just before the break, because I think I might have just missed something. Because, yeah, I have. Because she starts to talk about his brain and she gets stopped. And then when we're going to go to cross-examination in a minute, because we're going to go through the internal stuff through cross-examination, where the conversation is much more interesting, Alessi also gets stopped. And this is why I wanted to review Scotty Bellow's testimony, because after listening to Dr. Wolf, the brain surgeon, I couldn't remember from Scotty Bellow's testimony the stuff about his brain, the fact that he had, the specifics that Dr. Wolf talked about, I didn't remember that from Scotty Bellow's testimony. That's why I wanted to review it. And she gets stopped talking about it, which is bizarre, because she's the person who did the autopsy. So why is she not allowed to give the testimony about John's brain? So let's listen.
And so would that be his left or right side?
It would be both the right and the left, and it would be the part of the rib that is closer to the sternum.
All right, so this is still the ribs, but it comes up right now in a minute.
Is there a number of ribs that had fractures, or are they connected as one?
The fourth and the fifth, both on the right and the left, close to the sternum.
Have you, in your experience, seen ribs fractured during first aid or medical intervention?
Very often, yes.
Given your experience and your study of Mr. O'Keefe's body, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty how those rib fractures were obtained?
I believe those rib fractures were due to resuscitation.
And you have that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
I'd like to show you a different diagram, one of the head area. If we could enlarge the bottom right.
Why did he have IV sites in his hand? Had he been hospitalized prior to his death? They were treating him as if he was alive, even though there was no signs of life. But they were treating him as if he was alive because he was so low in body temperature. And they can't declare you dead if your body temperature is low, because there's been rare cases where people who've been frozen have been warmed up and they've come back to life. Let's say, for example, they've fallen into freezing water. So they're not injured. They've fallen into freezing water and their heart stops because it's freezing cold. And then they're pulled out. And once they're warmed up, they can resuscitate them. John wasn't resuscitatable because he had catastrophic head injury. But they have to, it's protocol. So they were giving him IVs and treatment as if he was alive. So they were giving him fluids, they were giving him medication, and they would have needed an access point. So in your hand is very common, isn't it, to use? But you don't bruise when you're dead. Was he still alive? He was on life support. So there probably was some movement. I don't know. That's a good point. But they did say there was no output whatsoever. There was no output from his heart. There was nothing as they were resuscitating him. Stonebridge was the brain expert, but she hasn't given testimony, has she? Where's her testimony? Stonebridge hasn't given testimony. Or has she? And I've just slept through it or something. Oh, first trial. Okay. No, we're talking about this trial. We're talking about what this jury know. So why have this jury not heard about John's brain from the person who did the autopsy? Why is the person who did the autopsy shut down in favor of someone else, and that someone else has been cherry-picked by Hank Brennan. That's shady.
Thank you. Using that diagram, could you assist us, doctor, and explain to us any observations you made about the back of John O'Keefe's head?
Yes. The main observation was a laceration that is a skin tear.
That's a truly, truly terrible. Hold on a minute. I can zoom it if I do this. That's a truly terrible picture. Because that looks like that's the injury. But it's not. If we look at this, this is from Court TV. I just took this screenshot from Court TV. And this is a measure. This area. That's what they do it using to measure the laceration. And that's the actual laceration. And that they shaved the back of his head. Obviously because of the brain injury. But that's the laceration. That's a measure. That's someone's finger. But this is it's such a bad drawing. Like, why? Why have the jury got this? Now, the jury will have seen also the actual photos. So it's not as bad as you think, that they're being completely misled. Stonebridge was bad for the Commonwealth. There you go, you see. So because Hank Brennan wants because Hank Brennan's better, let's put it this way, Hank Brennan's better at his job than Lally. He wanted a witness who would tell him exactly what he wanted to hear. Unfortunately, though, for Brennan, as I discussed yesterday, Dr. Wolf's testimony was just as good for the defence as it was for Commonwealth. So Brennan couldn't have been entirely satisfied with the fact that it still gives no indication at all about how John came to bang his head.
On the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head, to the right of midline. So this would be the midline. The laceration was somewhere here, is what we call the right occipital area. And associated with that, there was an abrasion over it that would have been here. So this was what we call a compound injury, an abraded laceration.
We'll turn in a few moments to your autopsy observations about the inside of Mr. O'Keefe's skull. But first, I want to just show you a photograph relative to what you described to us. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you a photograph. You recognize what's in that photograph?
Yes, this is a picture taken at the time of autopsy. This is the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head. The hair has been shaved off so that the injury can be clearly photographed, and it's a laceration with an associated abrasion.
Thank you. Your Honor, move this into evidence.
Okay.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
106.
So that can come into this. When you examine the laceration, do you measure it?
Yes,
Did you measure it in this case?
I did measure it.
How long was the laceration?
I measured it as 2.5 centimeters, which is close to an inch.
Do you examine a person's body before you begin to intrude? Do you examine the outside of a person's body first, or is there a certain procedure or order?
Yes, the external examination is done first, and the internal examination is done second.
I want to show you that photograph that you just recognized, and I would like you to explain what you see to the jury. Ms. Gilman, with your assistance. Thank you.
This is the laceration that I noted, and this is the scrape that's associated with it.
Take that down, please. After you make observations, what are your next steps in an autopsy?
The internal examination, after the external is performed, the pictures are taken, then we proceed with the internal examination of both the, as I mentioned before, the torso, the body, as well as the head.
I'd like you to take us through the internal examination. Did you have a chance to look internally behind the laceration you saw on the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head?
Yes.
And when you did that, could you describe for us what you saw?
Yes. The way we examine the head is we make an incision with a scalpel behind the ear from one side to the other. That allows us to reflect or pull back the scalp, and that will expose the skull underneath. We do this carefully so that we don't disfigure clearly the face. And when we reflected and when we pulled back the scalp, I noted that there was blood, what we call hemorrhage, under the laceration or associated with the laceration on the back of the right head. And then furthermore, there were skull fractures associated with that laceration, abrasion on the right side of the head.
Were the skull fractures in the same or different area?
The skull fractures were in multiple areas of the skull, what we call the base of the skull. Imagine the base of the skull is sort of a bowl, and the brain sits on top or in the bowl. When the brain is removed, you can have a very good view of the base of the skull. So when the brain was removed and we were able to look at the base of the skull, I noted that there were multiple fractures that appeared to be originating from the area of the laceration, or what would correspond to the area of the laceration.
When you made your examination of the fractures in the skull, did that lead you to your opinion, or was there more you needed to look at before you came to an opinion about the cause of death?
Well, that was part of the findings that led to my opinion. But yes, I removed the brain, and as is our protocol, I saved the brain in a special solution called formalin that allows the brain to become a little harder so that our neuropathologist in Boston could go ahead and examine it. Because when I did look at the brain, I noted that there were injuries. There was bleeding on top of the brain. And therefore, I saved it. The brain ultimately went to our Boston office, and our neuropathologist, Dr. Stonebridge, examined it and issued a report.
Did you engage in any type of analysis on your own about any injury to Mr. O'Keefe's brain?
I noted the kind of injuries I could see superficially on the brain. And I have looked at the brain after it was fixed and pictures of it, but I did not issue a report on it. The whole point was for our neuropathologist to examine it closely and issue a more detailed report.
I have a few more photos. Would now be an appropriate time for a break, Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay, so when they come back, he doesn't extend this discussion. They're almost straight away into toxicology. But when cross-examination happens, as we'll see, the conversation's shut down. So let's move us into cross-examination. 3:30. So we get long break, bit of discussion, and then we've got oh oh yeah. There was a lot of speculation. This is the beginning of the cross. There's a lot of speculation about who these people are. But they issued a statement the day after this. They issued a statement to say who these guys were. So there was like no ambiguity about who these guys were. Dear God. All right. I want to start just before 3:30.
Achieve. Again, the reason being that there are family members, next of kin that are waiting for these reports and these death certificates for various reasons. So is it possible to go over the 90 days? Absolutely, if necessary.
All right, so that's just about the death certificate.
In neuropathology, correct?
All right, okay. I wanna just get a little bit of this discussion here.
April 14th, correct. And I would assume that the death certificate was on or around that same day.
Thank you. Now, to back up a little bit with regard to the autopsy,
It was Connor Keefe and someone called Watson, who I'd never heard of.
it was conducted, I just want to do a little bit of a timeline, on January 31st of 2022, correct?
Yes.
And we discussed that the body of Mr. O'Keefe was presented to the Cape Cod location, correct?
Yes.
And you also discussed that you brought Dr. Stonebridge to work with you on this matter, correct?
She didn't physically come to the office. The way Dr. Stonebridge was involved is at the time of autopsy when the brain was removed. Having seen that there were injuries, I saved the brain in a special solution, and then the brain was transported to our facility in Boston. That's where Dr. Stonebridge examines the specimens. And after examining the brain, she issued a report.
Who asked Dr. Stonebridge to become involved in the matter?
I did.
And Dr. Stonebridge is triple board certified, correct?
Correct.
She's a forensic pathologist, correct?
Yes.
That means she's achieved board certification in forensic pathology like you?
Do you know that?
I do.
I'll allow them.
Yes, she's board certified in forensic pathology.
And she is board certified in general pathology, correct?
Yes.
And she's board certified in neuropathology, correct?
Correct.
Can you briefly?
So you would wonder why the Commonwealth brought on somebody else other than Dr. Stonebridge. Are the Commonwealth going to bring on Dr. Stonebridge on Tuesday? Or have they bypassed Dr. Stonebridge completely in this trial?
Briefly describe to the jury what neuropathology is?
Neuropathology is a subset or specific additional training in forensic pathology where the person spends a considerable amount of time, usually 1 to 2 years, examining brains and learning all about the diseases of the brain as well as trauma to the brain.
Now, you asked her to be involved, as you indicated earlier, correct?
Yes.
And you determined that she should be involved because there was a brain injury, correct?
There was trauma to the brain, correct?
Trauma to the brain. Is it
She's not on the witness list. Really? Is she not? She's on the defense witness list, though, isn't she? She's not on the witness list. So instead of Dr. Stonebridge, the jury hears from a cherry-picked brain surgeon from Florida who had a look at some photos, who didn't actually examine the brain, didn't get his hands on the brain, didn't actually look at the brain, just looked at a few photos of the brain. Interesting.
fair characterization that Dr. Stonebridge is sort of the brains of the brain area of autopsy? Is that fair?
I'm going to sustain the objection. Let's move on.
So with regard to Dr. Stonebridge, would you agree that she's really uniquely qualified in some ways? Or how would you describe her qualifications, Dr. Stonebridge?
Sustain.
With regard to Dr.
He
Stonebridge,
can't hear Hank, but he must be objecting. Unless she's sustaining off her own volition, but she is uniquely qualified. She's a forensic pathologist, plus she's a neuro expert. So arguably, she's better qualified to examine a dead brain than Dr. Wolf, however well qualified and however many brain surgeries he does in a week, or that he goes home at 6 o'clock in the morning to make his wife a cappuccino and other cute stories. However well qualified he is, Dr. Stonebridge, who actually got her hands on John O'Keefe's brain and looked at the actual brain, not just photos, she is uniquely qualified to give testimony on John O'Keefe's brain. I'm going to go back to trial 1 and listen to what Dr. Stonebridge said. Not today, but I think I'll do it tomorrow.
Stonebridge, what did she do?
I'm going to see you at sidebar on this, please.
I told you, it just gets shut down. They're not allowed to talk about this. Not allowed to talk about it. They're at sidebar now. Hank does not want the jury to know about Dr. Stonebridge. Exactly. Hank doesn't want anyone singing her praises. Huh? Huh. All right. It's only a short. All right, we're listening to him coming back. Dr. Stonebridge's testimony from last year was very impressive and fully supports the defence and not the state. I'm remembering little bits and pieces of it now. The defence will call Dr. Stonebridge. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. I'm very much looking forward to the defence case. I'm sick of Hank running the show now. He'll be a complete weasel during the defence case. I bet you any money he's objecting every 2 seconds. Bet you any money. The defence will call Dr. Stonebridge, basically confirmed the defence's case in her analysis of John's brain. I'm definitely going to go and find it and listen to it again. This sidebar's longer than I thought.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Scordi-Bello, have you, are you aware of an attorney name, or excuse me, a doctor named Zeke Wolf?
No, I'm not.
So when he asked that question, I certainly didn't have any comment. It was completely irrelevant until Dr. Wolf was called. So now it makes absolute sense why the lessee has asked her, does she know of Dr. Wolf?
Now I'd like to move on to another category.
So no more discussion about the brain, nothing. Got to move on to a completely different category. No discussion about the brain, not allowed to cross-examine her about the brain. So whatever was discussed at that sidebar, obviously Brennan got his own way. That's shocking.
Based on the information that was presented to you as part of your examination and analysis, is it correct that you presume that because Mr. O'Keefe's body was found in the snow and his body temperature was 80 degrees, that he died from hypothermia as one of the causes?
I reached that conclusion after performing the autopsy and after seeing some findings that were consistent with hypothermia and then combined with the information that was provided to me about Mr. O'Keefe's body being found in the snow, I came to the conclusion that was one of the things that contributed.
Did you consider whether there may have been other reasons as to why his body reached that temperature of 80 degrees? Sort of applying the scientific method and seeing if there were other reasons?
Other than being out in the snow? No, I did not.
Do you know whether there are other alternative reasons how his body could reach the temperature of 80 degrees?
People can become hypothermic for other reasons, such as sepsis. But in this particular case, I didn't have any reason to believe that that was part of the circumstances.
You're familiar with the medical phrase differential diagnosis, correct?
Yes.
And a differential diagnosis is a term that's used by doctors to pursue other potential causes of a medical injury. Is that a fair general statement?
Yes.
So, for example, if somebody is having difficulty breathing, a doctor may say, I think it's the heart is their primary hypothesis, but they may want to differentially diagnose this and look at the lungs. Is that an example of a differential diagnosis that let's look at the lungs to see if that may be the problem? Is that a good, fair example?
In the example you're giving, yes.
So applying that concept, and do you believe the concept of, well, applying that concept to this situation, did you perform a differential diagnosis as to the cause of the death and question whether there was hypothermia as any cause of the death of the decedent? Did you make that analysis?
I looked at the anatomic findings that I had at the time of autopsy, the information that was provided to me based on the circumstances and where the body was found. And I came to the conclusion that there were hypothermic changes in Mr. O'Keefe's body.
So you just used the phrase hypothermic changes. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Can there be hypothermic changes without a cause of death being hypothermia?
Yes, of course.
So you can have signs in the body of hypothermia, but you can also conclude that a cause of death is not from hypothermia, correct?
If the person is deceased and I am examining the body and there are multiple things that I believe contribute to the death, then I tend to include all of them. Meaning that if this was a drug intoxication and the body also showed signs of hypothermia, I would include both of them on the death certificate because there is no scientific way of teasing out whether it was just one or the other or both. In this particular case, I had two processes that were going on. One was the head trauma, and the other one were these hypothermic changes. I put all that together, and again, included or took into account the investigative information of where the body was found, what the temperature was when the body was found, whether the person was still alive or not. And I came to the conclusion that the cause of death was blunt impact injuries of head. And I included the hypothermia because I saw during the autopsy that there were changes consistent with hypothermia.
So I want to break that down a little bit, if I could, with you. So you testified on direct, and I think you alluded to it here, that the primary cause of death, use that phraseology on direct, was blunt force injury. Is that correct?
Blunt impact injuries to the head, yes.
Blunt impact injuries to the head, and that's the primary cause, right?
Correct.
And then there's, and I'm not clear on what you refer.
I'm not really sure why Alessi is so intent on John not having a contributory factor of hypothermia. If anybody wants to explain it to me, you're very welcome to. But in sub-zero temperatures, as it was, you're going to develop hypothermic changes pretty quickly. So I think they said it was something like 28 degrees at 6 a.m., which is, I think, about -7 for us on Celsius, something like that. So even if you were only out in the snow for an hour, you would have some kind of hypothermic changes as long as you were still alive. So it's actually not bad for the defense case if John does have some hypothermic changes. I don't really know why there had to be a really long discussion about this. The concern I've got is that he got into the weeds, and we're going to listen to it, but he got into the weeds so much. I wonder whether he lost the jury, that the jury, just started to tune it out because they don't understand why it's relevant. Now, maybe it will be clearer during the defense case. Trying to prove John O'Keefe wasn't out all night, but put there in the morning. It's the degree of hypothermia they're questioning. Yeah, I get that. But even if he was put out, because Lucky, the snowplow driver, said that there was a Ford Edge in the position of the flagpole between 3:30 and 4 when he went by. If that's when they put John O'Keefe's body at the flagpole, let's say 4 a.m., by 6 o'clock, when the paramedics arrived, he would have hypothermic changes, but only if he was still alive. So that's actually good for the defense case to have some hypothermic changes. But I don't know why they got really into the weeds over it, as he did. I think it was just a bit out. I was worried. So I hope it becomes clearer during the defense case. And I'm sure it will. They're saying that the hypothermic changes would be greater if he was there since 12:30. Not if he was dead, though. This is the thing. Like, obviously, you're going to get, when you're dead, your body cools down under normal circumstances, like normal room temperature. It only cools down approximately 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit per hour. But if you're out in sub-zero temperatures and you die, your body temperature plummets quickly because there's nothing to keep your body temperature up because you're dead. So you're already losing heat because you've no metabolism, you've no thermal regulation, you've nothing to keep your body warm. So your body temperature plummets. So even if he was only out for an hour, his body temperature probably would have been 80 degrees as it was. And there would have been, however, there would have been no hypothermic changes. Now, frostbite is interesting because you can have frostbite with no hypothermia, and you can have hypothermia with no frostbite. Because all frostbite is when your extremities get so cold that the tissue starts to freeze, you start developing signs of frostbite. Now, if you were, let's say, for example, out in, I don't know, the wild somewhere, and you were in freezing temperatures, but you were able to keep your body warm, but you had no way of keeping your hands warm, let's just say, it's a strange example, it's an unusual example, right? Just put your hands in your pockets or, you know, but anyway, let's just imagine the scenario where it's possible to keep your body temperature sufficiently up that you don't develop severe hypothermia. You still might develop frostbite in your extremities. So the two don't necessarily go hand in hand. Now, if he was already dead when he was put out, let's say at 4 o'clock, so he was out for 2 hours, he would have a very low body temperature as he did, but not necessarily have frostbite. But I think he could have been outside the whole time, but in the backyard. And if he was, then the fact that he only has some minimal hypothermic changes could be because he died reasonably quickly. So either way, the fact that there's hypothermic changes is not bad for the defence case. Was the 4 days just shielding the lawn from Lucky, not the body? The body was only there just before they left One Meadow. Don't know. Don't know, Martin. Don't know. There you go. Caught in a blizzard in a vehicle for 2 days and the vehicle runs out of gas. There are movies of people surviving but losing limbs from frostbite. Yeah, but they're not. They might be mildly hypothermic, but they're not severely, dangerously hypothermic that they die. But they get severe frostbite. See my comment about the PD parking lot and the third vehicle. All right, I'll play this and I'll go up the chat and try and find it.
Referred to on the right as a secondary cause of being hypothermia, but you've used a little different phrase in some of your answers, and I want to make sure I got it right. Hypothermic considerations. Can you repeat what it was?
They said have hypothermic changes.
Hypothermic changes, and we agree that you can have hypothermic changes without a conclusion of hypothermia, correct?
No, hypothermic changes are what I'm referring to are actual things that I can see in the organs that are consistent with hypothermia. They're anatomic findings. They're things I can see with my eyes.
So you can, I'm sorry, did you finish?
And those changes suggest and are consistent with someone being hypothermic.
As you sit here now, with regard to, you use the phraseology consistent with hypothermia, signs of hypothermia. That's what I want to pursue just a little bit with regard to further information. We got started on this by asking whether you used the concept of differential diagnosis and hypotheses to determine the cause and manner of death. And you said in one of your answers that you relied upon law enforcement information, correct? Is that part of it? It was, you brought that up. You're the one who said you relied upon that, correct?
Yes.
And you brought that up on your direct testimony and earlier in the cross. Is that correct, that you relied upon the investigation of law enforcement? So,
Sustained.
so now what I'd like to do is to ask you whether, using the concepts of differential diagnosis, scientific method, did you consider whether Mr. O'Keefe could have died somewhere other than where the body was found and been moved and placed in the snow? Did you consider that?
Sustained.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Move along with this. We can approach in a bit.
Thank you. What, if any, alternative?
Move along, we can approach in a bit. Move along, we can approach in a bit. Okay.
Diagnoses did you apply to Mr. O'Keefe?
I don't understand your question.
What alternative scenarios did you look at, if any, for the cause or manner of death of Mr. O'Keefe?
I'll allow that question. What, if any?
At the time of the autopsy, I documented injuries and signs of hypothermia. I was provided with a set of circumstances. And at the end of the investigation, or at the end of my timeline, I concluded on the cause, but I did not conclude, or I did not determine a manner. The manner would be the circumstances you are speaking about, whether I considered other causes or circumstances. That's not how it works. I don't come up with hypothetical scenarios on how those injuries occur. I try to state the injuries, describe the injuries, state the cause of death and why that person died. And then I use all kinds of other investigative information that is provided to me to determine if I have enough to make a determination on the manner.
Did anyone provide to you any alternatives as to the finding of the body of Mr. O'Keefe in the snow?
Personally, to me, no.
Did you ask for any alternatives to the nature and location of the injury or death of Mr. O'Keefe?
I asked for all the information that was available.
Understood, but my question is, did you ask for any alternatives to the information that was provided to you as regards the location of the injuries? Did anyone provide you any alternatives to where the injuries could have occurred?
No.
So,
I'm going to let the answer stand. So the answer is no, so there's no evidence of that. So next question.
so you talked about the information you had at.
It was the Alberts who had a Ford Edge. Did Higgins have one as well? Is Ford Edge popular? I know the Alberts had one. It was the Alberts who had a Ford Edge, I'm sure. Okay, so I'm looking at this comment by Auntie Ree. Michelle, if you slow down the video of the PD parking lot and get photos of as much of the back seat of the truck, I just saw what appeared to be a person laid against the back of the front seat. I can't see it, honestly. So I'm just playing this from microdots, but I assume you're talking about this footage here. I can't see anybody in the front seat. I'm assuming you mean in this truck here. I can't make anyone out. I think he's getting a coat or something. I don't know what he's doing. The whole parking lot scenario is just bizarre. So he's got something out. Oh, he's got a bag. So he went and collected a bag. Use video Jesus' video. It's clearer. I don't even know who Video Jesus is. Kevin Albert and Brian Albert had 4 edges. All right, I'll go and find Video Jesus while we continue with this.
At the time. What time is that?
The information at the time was a preliminary police report and verbal communications regarding the circumstances of how Mr. O'Keefe's body was found.
And when I asked about the time, I'm on calendar time. Was this January, February, March, April of 2022?
The preliminary police report was on the day of the autopsy, and then information, I don't remember exactly how long, but in the weeks following, information was, coming in.
Do you have the ability to amend a death certificate?
Yes, I do.
And you can amend a certificate if you obtain further information with regard to the circumstances surrounding the death. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In your previous answers, you were talking about the information you had at the time. And I'm concluding that the latest that would be is April of 2022. Is that correct?
Correct.
Have you obtained or been provided with further information, in other words, information after April of 2022 regarding the cause or manner of death?
What do you mean, have I been provided? Has someone physically provided me with a report on different circumstances?
Well, what I'm just talking about is any other information that you have received or considered in terms of the analysis with regard to the cause or manner of death.
Received in what way?
Here's what I'll do. I'll be a little more specific. What I want to do is to get at the head injury of the decedent, okay? Is it fair to say that the head injury, you called it a traumatic, state what you phrased that as, because I want to use your phraseology.
Blunt impact injuries of the head.
So blunt impact injuries of the head. Is it fair to say that that was a very severe injury?
It was a severe injury, correct?
And would Mr. O'Keefe had been rendered unconscious nearly instantaneously with death following shortly thereafter?
It's very possible, yes.
Is it more than possible? Is it probable that that's what would have occurred?
I can't tell you how quickly he would have been rendered unconscious, but at some point after that injury, yes, he would have been rendered unconscious.
Is it possible he could have been rendered unconscious immediately?
So she's answered it this way. I think you need another person for that. Let's move on from that, Mr. Leslie.
I think you need another person for that. Let's move on. So he's not allowed to talk about the head injury with the person who did the autopsy. That's crazy. That's just absolutely freaking crazy. The most appropriate person to discuss the cause of death is the medical examiner who did the autopsy. You need another person for that. It's like saying she's not qualified enough. Unbelievable. Unfreaking believable. What, Judge Bev's got an award? Are you kidding me? Got what? Got the stupidest judge award. Most biased judge of the year award. Judge Gull won it in 2024. So, yeah, Bev Canoni can win it in 2025. Judge Gull won it hands down in 2024. Person of the year. No, go away. Who on earth? No. Many Alberts had Ford Edges. Why did they get buy one, get one free? Buy one, get one half price. Guess who gave the award? Aperture gave the award. All right, okay. That's silly. That's silly. Anyway, I can't find Video Jesus. Look at the results I get. So this is my filter. I've got Video Jesus, channels. I've got Revelations of Jesus Christ, Jesus.net, the Church of Jesus Christ, General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ. I'm not seeing Video Jesus though. Jesus, just Jesus is on. Jesus Video, Jesus Lives, Jesus TV. Got a lot of Jesuses. Not got Video Jesus. Somebody's going to have to give me the video. Anyhow. This is crazy. This is crazy. Hashtag Video Jesus. All right, I'll try.
You made your own determination of the cause of death, correct?
Yes, that's my job.
Understood. And what I want to do is to pursue the basis of your determination. So you used the phrase brain impact injury.
Blunt impact.
A blunt impact injury. Have I got that correct?
Blunt impact injuries of head. Yes.
Of head, right. And that's your conclusion, correct?
Yes.
Based upon your conclusion, did you make any determination as to whether the decedent would be able to carry out any purposeful movement after that injury?
Define purposeful movement.
Sure. I'm talking about the ability to perhaps manipulate their hands.
I don't know.
Did you make any determination as to whether they would be able to engage in any cognitive functions, meaning processing things and making decisions?
I did not make that determination, no.
Did you observe any pattern to the injuries to the head of the decedent?
A pattern? I observed that there were injuries to the back of the head as well as other internal injuries to the base of the skull, as well as the brain.
Your Honor, if we could please publish, I'm just going to check to make sure they're in. If we could, Your Honor, publish 160 that is in evidence. But before we do, Mr. Wolf, I would like to approach Your Honor and let you know in case there's anything further that needs to be done. Thank you.
Is there? Did you show it to Mr.
It's
President?
already been agreed to as an evidence. and it
Okay.
is in evidence.
Oh, it's in there?
And it might be easier to see it in the screen, whatever screen is most convenient. Whatever screen is most convenient for you. And what I want to do is to go over what is depicted.
Check my email. I sent you the picture. Took off the video announced and outlined. Okay, thank you. God, I've not been in my emails for a long time. The last email I had relating to YouTube is regarding Delphi. Maybe it's gone in my spam. No. All right, I'll keep playing this and I'll look for it.
Darren, I'd like to start with just some basics. What is that white rectangle that is on the photograph?
This,
Yes.
that's a ruler.
And what's the purpose of the ruler?
To show a scale. When I measure the injury, I use the ruler to document that.
And if you could please draw your further attention to what I will refer to, and you use your own term, but just to start it, the horizontal line that is appears to be a laceration. You know what I'm referring to?
This, yes, this is a laceration.
Right. So it's fair to say that that's a laceration.
Correct.
And just so we get all that's depicted on this, you referred to earlier up above that, the red area. Is that an abrasion?
Yes.
And do you all
Says it's not recognized. No, that's definitely my email address. Maybe they've I'll try again. Maybe they've banned it because I never use it. Do they do things like that? Weird, it says it was sent. All right, I'll have another look.
also denote to the left, almost like a J type item going vertically up? Yes, and going up. Do you see that?
Yeah, that I did not note that specifically. I just noted the whole injury as
That's
part of the abrasion.
That's my point. So you didn't make a separate note of what appears to be a J, and it might be easier to see it in the screen over there. It's your conclusion, but is it easier to see there?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, and so you didn't make a separate note as to what that was in your report, correct?
No, I did not.
Do you consider that an abrasion or something else?
I believe that's still an abrasion.
Do you conclude that that J is different in any manner from the abrasion that you've noted above the laceration?
I believe it could be part of the whole abrasion, or it could be something different.
Fair enough. Would a fall backwards on a flat frozen ground produce a circular and not a linear abrasion as depicted here on the back of an injured person's head?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Assume a fall backwards on a flat frozen ground. Would such a fall in impact present that type of pattern, or would it present a circular pattern, perhaps with something like a starfish in the middle?
I'll allow that. Can you answer that?
A starfish.
I can say that a fall backwards could very well produce that injury.
My question is more specific, and that is a fall backwards where the person impacts the back of their head on flat frozen ground. would you expect that type of a laceration from that type of a fall? Not just a general fall backwards, but specifically a fall backwards where the back of the head hits flat frozen ground. Would you expect that?
I could, yes.
And under what circumstances could a laceration like that and an abrasion, all of it together, what circumstances could cause that type from a fall backwards on flat frozen ground?
Well, the laceration is due to the blunt impact, and so is the abrasion. The abrasion is friction. So depending on the type of surface, you mentioned flat frozen ground, it's quite possible to have an injury as the one depicted. There's nothing inconsistent with this injury and a fall on someone's on the back of the head with a blunt surface.
Are you familiar with the phrase pattern recognition in medicine?
Yes.
And isn't pattern recognition something that requires training with regard to being able to recognize certain patterns and determining what could be causing that pattern?
Yes.
And just merely recognizing whether there is a pattern takes certain specialty training, etc.
Correct.
And isn't pattern recognition a principle that you apply in the medical examiner's office?
Yeah, we do.
And so example of pattern recognition could be a knife wound, correct?
Yes.
Could be a gunshot.
Correct.
And there's certain patterns that you see on a decedent that can be consistent with those types of causes of injury, correct?
Correct.
Assuming a fall backwards onto frozen ground and there being on a lawn with grass, would you expect to see any grass at all in the injury site?
It's possible to have grass.
Is it possible to have well, are you familiar with the height and weight of the decedent generally? And if you need to look at your notes, please do so.
Yes. Mr. O'Keefe was approximately 6'1" and 216 pounds.
So assuming a fall backwards and an impact ahead on a ground with grass, a person who's 6'1", there is going to be significant acceleration forces that occur as they're going backwards. Is that correct?
That's fair to say, yes.
And therefore, the more acceleration forces, usually there's a correlation with the force of the impact.
Correct.
And in terms of force of impact and assuming grass on the ground, would you do you believe it's more probable than not that one would then see some grass on the head?
Sustained is definitely.
Given what you testified regarding the height of Mr. O'Keefe, and assuming what I just gave to you as a fall backwards and acceleration and forces, would you expect to see anything else on the back of his head?
You have to be more specific than that.
Right. I thank you. So would you expect to see, is it possible if that was the manner of the fall that there should be grass on the head? Is that possible?
Sustained.
Did you consider at all in your evaluation?
I don't know whether there would be grass, but I would imagine that there may be some like debris of some kind if you fell on the ground. I would imagine, potentially, especially if it's bleeding, because it would like stick to the wound. So I would maybe expect some debris, but there doesn't appear to be any. Okay, so I got the email from We Are Mad. So it's hashtag Video Jesus. Brian Higgins, Karen Reid trial, enhanced CCTV, uninterrupted, first pass with neat video, whatever that means. I'm still not seeing somebody in the front seat. So this is Brian Higgins. Opening the door. You can't see anyone in the front seat. You can't see anything at all in the front seat. So he's getting something out. I thought he was getting a coat out, but no, it's a bag. Look, he's got this big bag on the back of it on him now. I'm not seeing a person though.
Let me back up. Do you see any evidence of grass in this depiction?
No, I do not.
Did you recall ever seeing any evidence of grass when you were performing the
Right, I'm going to
autopsy?
move on to hypothermia. So that's nearly done. We have lunch. Okay.
All right, Mr. Alessio, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Scordi-Bello, and welcome back.
Thank you.
I want to move on to a slightly different aspect of the hypothermia discussion. So you've acknowledged previously that hypothermia is a very difficult diagnosis to make, correct?
Correct.
And you acknowledged that in your grand jury testimony in this proceeding, correct? Do you recall that?
I do.
And you indicated in that grand jury proceeding, generally the diagnosing hypothermia is based on contextual clues. Is that correct?
On autopsy findings and investigative information, yes.
Right. And the last part, investigative, and that's that legal part, sort of the law enforcement contribution. Is that correct that you're referring to?
Correct.
You diagnosed Mr. O'Keefe with hypothermia based upon certain medical data that you believe you observed in the gastric area, in the pancreatic area. Is that correct?
Correct.
And just for, I think most people will get this, just to be clear, gastric is sort of synonymous with the stomach.
Stomach.
And then we know the pancreas is a separate organ. And in your autopsy, you observed for example, the lining of both the stomach and the pancreas. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what was the word you used?
Let's start with the stomach. Did you observe the lining of the stomach as part of Mr. O'Keefe as part of the autopsy?
Yes, I observed some hemorrhages in the lining of the stomach.
We'll get to that, right? But I just want to talk about the organs and what aspects of the organs first, and then we'll get to that. And with regard to the pancreas, what aspect of the pancreas did you observe?
I examined both the external surface and the tissues around it, as well as the pancreas itself by making several cuts.
And there was also a histopathology report that was relevant to both the stomach and the pancreas, correct?
Correct.
Histopathology?
Spell it, Mr. Alessio.
Histopathology. So that histopath information informed your hypothermia analysis, is that correct?
The histopathology was done to further confirm my finding or my determination of hypothermia.
So do I have it correct? And let's start with the pancreas. That you noted the pancreas was congested and diffusely hemorrhagic. Do I have that correct? And you feel free to look at your report, please.
I will.
I want to see this autopsy report. I hope they release it now the trial's done. Well, after the trial's done.
I specifically, if it helps, I'm
Yes.
looking at
Page 4.
the report of autopsy. It's not numbered pages, but it would be 4. And you see liver, gallbladder, and pancreas is 1. And then you go down a couple more and you see digestive system. That's what I'm focusing on.
Okay.
And then, and the next page is the histopathology.
Yes.
All right. Are we sort of oriented in the same location?
Yes.
All right. So let's start with the pancreas. So if you look at the histopathology page, it says endocrine and exocrine pancreatic tissue with vascular congestion in patchy parenchymal That's PARENCHYMAL, hemorrhage, autolytic changes. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And I want to go at these one at a time. So now I'm going to jump back to the previous page where you discussed the heading liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you see the last sentence says the pancreas is congested and diffusely hemorrhagic. You see that?
Yes.
So now what I'd like to do, and is that what you're rooting in, if you will, the analysis of hypothermia?
The determination of hypothermia was made, yes, based on these findings and the circumstances that was provided. Yes.
Right, and thank you. I'm going to get to the circumstances, but it's sort of the medical legal construct that we were talking about. I want to just start first with the medical, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Right, we're gonna really get into the weeds now. If you haven't seen this already, this gets really into the weeds, and I don't know how the jury managed to follow it, to be honest. Can someone tell me what the device is the woman holds on her face? She's the court reporter. She's basically saying what they're saying to read it into the record, like for the transcripts. I don't know how she listens and speaks at the same time, but that's what it is. That's what it's for. And it's like stuck to her face so that no one else can hear her talking. His pocket. I don't remember his pocket being ripped in the first trial. So I don't know whether it's something that's happened. God knows what they've been doing with these exhibits, or whether it was ripped in the first trial and no one remembers. But I don't know. It's pretty difficult to rip jeans pockets, honestly. Listen to AJ's opening on hypothermia. Yeah, he says that they're not he's not hypothermic. But I'm sure that I'll be discussing this more when the medical people have spoken for the defense. That's not the correct video with the heat maps. Okay. It is to do with the transcript. She's saying everything that they're saying, reads it into the record so that they can prepare the transcripts from it. Must not have been Levi's, yeah. Law and Lumber showed the gene slip from trial 1 and then trial 2. He thought it was odd too. God knows. When I saw it, I thought maybe it was done by the forensic people to get a sample. You know, sometimes they cut bits off and stuff. So who knows? If it definitely wasn't ripped in trial 1, then that's pretty odd. Pretty odd. Because surely they should just go back in the evidence bag and sit in storage somewhere, safe and sound, until they're needed next. You wouldn't think there'd have to be anything further done to them. It's absolutely bizarre. It's just bizarre.
So then let's now move to the organ of the stomach, a synonym gastric in terms of your report. So let's go to, please, back to the histopathology section. And under that, under pancreas is stomach. And there's a bulleted one sentence that says gastric tissue with vascular congestion and focal mucosal hemorrhage. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And then let's go back, as we did with the pancreas, for the stomach, go back to the previous page in your report under the heading digestive system. And the second sentence states the gastric mucosa shows focal areas of linear hemorrhages. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
So we've got hemorrhage discussion with the pancreas. We've got hemorrhage discussion with the stomach and the gastric area. Your diagnosis of hypothermia was not based just on gastric and pancreatic hemorrhaging alone, though, was it?
No.
And you did fairly refer to other circumstances just moments ago in your answer, correct?
Correct.
And we're going to get to that. So that means that your diagnosis of hypothermia was also informed by the information we discussed earlier that was provided to you by former Trooper Proctor in his investigation. Is that correct?
Correct.
And one aspect of that information is that he was found, Mr. O'Keefe was found in the snow, correct?
Yes.
So let's go to the death notification report. Am I generally correct that you were, I'm sorry,
Rephrase it.
I will. Thank you, Your Honor. Do you recall the death notification report in this matter?
I do recall, the very initial first information that comes in. That's the death notification given to our intake staff.
Do you recall the contents of that death notification report?
Would you like me to summarize? I don't recall I don't have it in front of me, but I can tell you what the gist of it was.
Would it be helpful to you if I showed you a document that
Sure.
might refresh your recollection on what that, a document that may refresh
She
your
said
recollection?
sure. I
Thanks.
think you heard her.
I did. Thank you, Your Honor. May I approve? Yeah, but,
Yep.
Thank you.
Show Mr. Brennan.
Go, Mr. Brennan, then he can whine about it.
Dr. Scordi-Bello, what I'd like to do, you can read anything you want, but I'm just going to reference to the section that says circumstances of death.
Yes.
What I'd like you to do is read it to yourself, not out loud, and then when you just that section to here. And once you're done, if you could kindly look up and let me know.
Okay.
Dr. Scordi-Bello, did that refresh your recollection with regard to the circumstances of death section of the death notification report?
Yes.
And you could please state now what your refreshed recollection is on that topic.
Yes. The initial intake death notification was made by a physician at the hospital. And it stated that we were dealing with a adult male that was found in a snowbank. There was note of
Found in a
having,
snowbank.
been at
No,
a party. There was
stop it. He wasn't found in a snowbank. He wasn't found in a snowbank. He was found in the snow, but it wasn't a snowbank. He wasn't like buried. It only really started to snow really, really heavily in the morning. There was only a thin layer of snow. Like it had started to build up, but it wasn't like really thick. If you've been found, how did they find him if he was in a snowbank? That's just silly.
was some information as to the decedent was walking to a house. There was reference to some sort of altercation or dispute with
Sustain.
There was some altercation. I'm not surprised that was sustained. If that's what was said in the original death notification, that there was an altercation. Hank must have like been nearly having a heart attack when she said that.
Strike.
Jurors disregard that. Move on with this, Mr. Leslie. With this, but just move on.
Yeah, yes. In terms of the differential diagnosis concept that we were talking about before, based upon your refreshed recollection of circumstances of death as discussed in the death notification report, based upon that, did you consider whether Mr. O'Keefe could have been injured and died somewhere other than the front lawn of 34 Fairview?
I'm going to allow that.
Well, what's the bad?
Initially, no.
Initially, no. So initially, no, because found in a snowbank. So initially, she'd no reason to believe he died anywhere else. But did she then go on to consider that he died somewhere else?
Let's go to significance, if any, of hemorrhaging of the two organs we were talking about, the pancreas and the stomach. Is it correct that the hemorrhaging of a pancreas can be caused by many different things?
Yes, it is.
And to be clear, you found evidence of hemorrhaging of the pancreas of Mr. O'Keefe in the autopsy, correct?
Correct.
And is it correct before the grand jury, you yourself were evaluating whether the injuries had been sustained in a different environment? Well, let me ask it this way. Do you recall what your testimony was in the grand jury about hemorrhaging of the pancreas and possibilities of injuries being sustained in different environments? Do you recall any testimony on that subject?
All right, I'll see you at 10.
See him at sidebar. Sidebar.
Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. At the grand jury, did you testify as follows? If the injuries had been sustained in a different environment where the temperature wasn't that low, then there might have been an alternative explanation for those gastric and pancreatic hemorrhages. You recall that?
Yes.
Hemorrhaging of the pancreas can also be caused by blunt force trauma, correct?
Correct.
Hemorrhaging of the pancreas can be caused by CPR, correct? Cardiopulmonary resuscitation.
It's possible.
Do you know what a Lucas machine is?
Yes.
And a Lucas machine is an automated CPR machine, correct?
Correct.
And it's a rather large device, correct? It gets strapped down to the chest of someone. So instead of someone having to exercise, etc., you put on a Lucas machine that goes over the chest and it automatically does the compressions, right?
Correct.
Lucas machines can cause hemorrhaging, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, wasn't a Lucas machine applied to Mr. O'Keefe?
I believe so.
And wasn't the Lucas machine applied from when the first responders came to the scene and he was in the ambulance continually and through when he was in the hospital?
I believe so. Yeah.
So when a Lucas machine is used in resuscitation efforts, you'd actually expect to see some hemorrhaging, wouldn't you?
Where?
In the stomach, in the pancreas, would you expect to see it there?
Not in the mucosa of the stomach and not as extensive in the pancreas.
Let's.
All right, I'll show you what a Lucas machine is because I've just looked it up. That's a Lucas machine. It looks pretty intense. But if it's pressing there on the chest, it's going to break ribs. Don't know that it will cause hemorrhaging in the stomach and the pancreas, though. I think that, I don't know. His stomach's a bit lower down than that. Oh, shit. Oops. Oops. Sorry. Press the wrong button. Hold on. Let me get it back. Here we go. All right. Let me reshare. I accidentally took the share screen off.
So you would agree that from the use of a Lucas machine, you would expect some degree of hemorrhaging in the pancreas, correct?
Not always.
But it's certainly possible that a Lucas machine causes hemorrhaging of the pancreas, correct?
It's possible.
And now let's move to, and there was evidence of hemorrhaging.
Well, the Lucas machine didn't share. Okay. I must have clicked off before the Lucas machine. All right. This is a Lucas machine. It looks pretty intensive. That looks like a real person. So it's definitely like going to break ribs, isn't it? I don't know about stomach though and pancreas. It looks kind of medieval. It looks like the modern version of a medieval torture device. Look at that. That's kind of scary. Yeah, it does. It looks scary, yeah. Never seen one, no. No, I haven't. Emmy testified it could potentially cause hemorrhaging in the stomach. It must be pretty rough. It must be pretty rough if it does. It must be pretty forceful. Lucas machine is brutal.
In the pancreas of Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
Correct.
Now let's move to the stomach. Isn't it possible that a Lucas machine could cause hemorrhaging in the stomach?
Personally, I have not seen it in that context.
But do you rule that out?
I can't rule it out. I can only tell you my experience.
So your personal experience is you don't believe you've seen that, but you can't rule out that a Lucas machine causes hemorrhaging to the stomach. Is that correct?
I don't believe a Lucas machine causes hemorrhage to the mucosa of the stomach.
Right. I'm not yet at the mucosa of the stomach, which is a subset of the stomach, right? You're talking about the gastric rugae.
Talking about the inner lining of the
inner
stomach.
lining, and another name for the inner lining of the stomach is the gastric rugae, R-U-G-A-E, correct?
Yes.
So I'm just talking about the stomach in general, not a subset of the stomach. Is it possible that a Lucas machine could cause hemorrhaging in the stomach?
Not in the stomach, around the stomach, in the soft tissues of the torso.
Okay.
I get what she's saying, because if you've got intense pressure pressing down on the ribs, it's going to crack the ribs and it might cause some hemorrhaging in the soft tissues under the ribs, which will then be pressure to the stomach, but actually inside the stomach. So the internal wall of the stomach, I don't see how that would cause that hemorrhaging. I think he loses the jury here. I really do. I think he loses the jury. He gets too far into the weeds. And I don't know why he needs to do this, honestly. The stomach is further down. Thank you. The stomach is further down. So you're going to get potentially, like the stomach is like there. Like there. So, yeah, you might get, like under the ribs, once the ribs have cracked, you might get soft tissue injuries. It might damage the top of the stomach, certainly the esophagus. So, and you've got some maybe the top of the stomach, but I don't think it's going to damage the internal wall of the stomach. I don't. I really don't. Well, that's just by looking at it and looking at its position. That's all I'm taking it on. I mean, I don't know anything about these machines. I'm just looking at the position it's on in these pictures and thinking about it from there. She's going to get a headache frowning like that. Right, she's going to be really tense muscles in her head, and she's going to get a headache.
So you've said that you're aware that Mr. O'Keefe was hooked up to a Lucas machine, correct?
Yes.
And are you aware of the length of time that Mr. O'Keefe was hooked up to a Lucas machine?
No, I am not.
Do you know how many compressions per minute a Lucas machine causes?
I would have to say close to 60.
Would 100 compressions per minute be a reasonable amount of compressions for a Lucas machine to cause?
Sure.
So assume 37 minutes of a person hooked up to a Lucas machine and assume 100 compressions per minute. That would result in 3,700 compressions from a Lucas machine, correct?
Correct.
Could 3,700 compressions from a Lucas machine explain hemorrhaging in the pancreas?
You could.
And that explanation could be why there's hemorrhaging in the pancreas as opposed to hypothermia causing hemorrhaging in the pancreas, correct?
Possible.
I could see that, Shelley. The ribs breaking could lead to bleeding. Yeah, absolutely. If the machine is hooked up lower than it should, it could possibly cause it. Yeah.
Did you consider that at all in your autopsy report, the effect of the Lucas machine? Is it written anywhere in your autopsy report?
I do consider changes due to cardiopulmonary resuscitation, the rib fractures.
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it's setting up for something their expert's going to say. Unless he's good at that, he's good at laying foundation for things that have not happened yet. So I'm reserving judgment on the overall necessity of this until I've heard the defense experts. But at this point, I think he's potentially lost the jury. If you lose the jury, they just switch off and they're not really listening. And therefore, the foundations you've set, you've just wasted your time and probably annoyed them. I just think he could have done this in a more concise way. Let's just put it that way. But I will be discussing this again once I've heard the defense experts anyway. So I want to get onto the Wisniewski changes, because that did get into the weeds. But I went and looked up a paper on it, so I've got a paper lined up. Not going to read it all, so don't worry.
That were observed were attributed to CPR. Usually we will see some amount of hemorrhage in the soft tissue.
Didn't lose me, I was gripped. I was interested by it. I'm thinking about the average jury. I like this kind of stuff because I've learned stuff. I've learned things here, but I'm just thinking about the average jury.
But in this context, with the gastric findings, the pancreatic findings, and the information that he was found in the snow with a body temperature of 80 degrees, my opinion was that those hemorrhages, along with the gastric hemorrhages and his body temperature, were consistent with hypothermia.
My question was, does your report state anywhere the words Lucas machine?
No.
And you agree that a Lucas machine can cause hemorrhaging to the pancreas,
It can cause hemorrhage in a lot of tissues,
but including the pancreas.
including the pancreas.
There we go. Okay. Okay. Good. That's right. It's all reasonable doubt. If you can show experts don't agree, it's doubt. It is, but it's down to the jury determining what they deem to be reasonable doubt. And once you've lost them, once you've gone into the weeds and you've lost them, then they disregard the testimony, and that's a problem.
If you see hemorrhaging of the pancreas and you believe that hemorrhaging is a contributor to hypothermic deaths, wouldn't you also expect to see Wisniewski ulcers?
Wisniewski in the house. Wisniewski in the house, like they did Arca last time. The jury disregarded Arca last time. According to the jurors that have spoken out, the jury disregarded Arca because they thought that Arca had been paid for by Karen's insurance, because they were told that the defense didn't employ them. So they speculated. I mean, they shouldn't have done, but they did. They speculated on, well, if the defense didn't employ them, who did? And they concluded, not that it was a federal investigation, because why would they think that? Instead, they thought it was Karen's either car or house insurance, and they were saying that it wasn't a collision, so they wouldn't have to pay out, or something along those lines. You can kind of understand where they would go with that, but that's the danger of them not being told the truth as to how Arca came to be involved in this case in the first place. And whatever it was that persuaded them to disregard it, that's what they did. They disregarded it, which is terrifying. Like, juries are so fickle that they'll disregard entire testimony for the strangest of reasons, and you can't preempt it. You can't predict it. It's just really scary. That, you know, literally someone's freedom is on the line here. And they're disregarding probably the best testimony of entire trial one, and the jury disregarded it. If the jury had listened to Arca, Karen would have been a free woman. We just wouldn't be here. But they disregarded Arca's testimony.
I did note gastric hemorrhages.
So the court reporter needs to have a spelling of that. Doctor, can you give us the spelling of that?
Would you like to give it?
I bet she doesn't know how to spell it. I bet she doesn't know how to spell it, because it's a terrifying word. I'll show you. So it's Wisniewski. Wisniewski. He's probably got it written down and she doesn't. I've been on a jury. I'll tell you something. One of the jurors couldn't understand anything that was going on, and we were allowed to discuss. Right, as long as we were all in our room, all in the jury room, we were allowed to discuss prior testimony. So in breaks or whenever we were sent to the jury room because there was an objection or whatever, we were allowed to talk about the testimony. And there was one juror who couldn't understand, like, any of the experts or anything. She couldn't understand them. And she would ask me to explain. I could have literally told her anything. And everyone else listened while I explained what an expert had been talking about. That's how scary juries are.
If you'd like me to, I
Go ahead.
Thank you. WISCHN EWSKI. So,
Oh, so he's even spelled it differently than what's on this journal article. He spelled it SKI. Might be a German word. It's obviously someone's name. Wisniewski. Like these kind of things are generally named after someone. You know, named after the person who's discovered them. So Wisniewski is probably someone's surname. It sounds Polish. Wisniewski. Sounds Polish, maybe Russian. I don't know.
can you just tell the jurors what Wisniewski spots or Wisniewski ulcers are?
Wisniewski spots are small hemorrhages, small areas of bleeding in the mucosa of the stomach that are thought to be associated with hypothermia, among other things. They are believed to be either a reaction to stress due to the hypothermia or some form of what we call reperfusion injury.
See, I was really interested in this because I'd never heard of any of this before. But I found this case report. I'm only going to read the summary. Wisniewski spots in fatal hypothermia case report. 69-year-old male was found dead at the roadside. So very similar. In October, death was declared suspicious by a local prosecutor. An autopsy was mandated. An autopsy, a large number of dark brown coloured oval-shaped lesions ranging from 1 to 15 millimeters, so really tiny, under the mucosa defined as Wisniewski spots when stomach was dissected were observed. For information mechanism of Wisniewski spots, there has no definite conclusions. More studies are needed. So it's not really well known. That's back in 2015. So there's even debate, like in the academic literature, on Wisniewski spots. Many microscopic findings related to the hypothermia have defined such as arrhythmia. I can't say it. Due to freeze, purple colored spots on elbows and knees, Wisniewski spots on gastric mucosa, fatty degeneration of cardiomyocytes and renal proximal tubules. So these are all like some of the things that can happen during hypothermia. Hemorrhagic pancreatic necrosis, cardiomyocyte necrosis. However, these findings are also indicated as non-specific findings. Wisniewski spots are dark-coloured lesions in the gastric mucosa associated with hypothermia. These lesions defined by Wisniewski for the first time, so yeah, it's someone's name, in 1895, can be quite decisive in terms of hypothermia when evaluated together with other non-specific findings, such as frostbite or I don't even know what that is. So together with a bunch of other findings, Wisniewski findings are considered those that come along with hypothermia. But I guess if you just found those spots with no other evidence of hypothermia, then you couldn't possibly associate it with hypothermia, could you? So it's debatable. It's fascinating, though. I bet you any money Alessi's been reading all these, like every journal article that he could find on it. Like, I bet he does a lot of his own research, does Alessi.
Is it correct that if someone is believed to die, at least in part, from hypothermia, that in 90% of the cases of death from hypothermia, you would find Wisniewski's ulcers?
I do not know the exact number.
Is it that you're not recalling what the percentage is for?
Do you want to see what they actually look like? And I ask you this question with all sincerity, because you might go, ugh! But do you want to see what they look like? All right, I'll show you. Right, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to let you know if you want to turn away. You're eating. If you want to turn away, and I'll put them on the screen in 3, 2, 1 now. Autopsy cases. I'm surprised Google hasn't blocked these out. Well, that's what Wisniewski spots look like. Gastric mucosa, hypothermia, something else, head injury. But yeah, that's what they look like. All right, taking them off the screen now. So you're safe to come back. You're safe to come back now.
Or how many, the percent of cases for death of hypothermia that you would expect to find Wisniewski's ulcers?
I don't.
So,
Do you
yeah.
recall? Do you recall?
Hold on.
Okay.
Move on. The objection sustained. So
Okay.
you're asking it. Yes. Go
Okay.
ahead.
There were no Wisniewski's ulcers present in Mr. O'Keefe. Is that correct?
I believe there were.
Can you point anywhere in your autopsy report where the word Wisniewski appears?
I did not call them Wisniewski spots. I called them gastric hemorrhages.
Right. So you didn't use the term Wisniewski and you didn't use the term ulcer, correct? In your
Probably because she couldn't spell it.
report at all.
No, I used gastric hemorrhages under the title of hypothermia.
Do you believe that all hemorrhages in the pancreas are Wisniewski ulcers?
You mean the stomach?
I want to start with the pancreas.
Wisniewski ulcers are the term is used to describe the gastric hemorrhages.
Right. So I wanted to clarify that. So now I want to move to the stomach.
Okay.
Do you believe all hemorrhages in the stomach are Wisniewski ulcers?
Not all of them.
Therefore, there can be Wisniewski ulcers and not be hemorrhaging, correct? Just by logic?
And not be hemorrhaging?
Correct. You can have a Wisniewski ulcer but not have hemorrhaging.
You could, but ulceration would manifest in what we call hemorrhage, the actual appearance of it.
What I'd like to do now is, Mr. Wolf, what has been in.
They look like sesame seeds. I think they look like currants. And I love currants, but I do think they look like currants. Or maybe mouse poo. They look like mouse poo.
in evidence. What I'd like to do is to, with your honor's permission, publish some depictions of first the gastric mucosa, and then start with that, your honor, publish that.
All right. So this is the one that we have not introduced into evidence openly, but it's sidebar, right?
What I'd like to do is I'll start out with the one that is in evidence, which is the gastric mucosa.
Okay.
Start with that.
What number?
What was the first thing I said? Currants. Currants. Do you not have currants where you live? Like little black dried fruit? Currants.
Your honor, it just
Like sultanas. I hate sultanas, but I love currants. But yeah, they're similar to sultanas, but they're just smoking. the smaller. Has the hoover broken? I don't know. I have to ask Kyle. He does the hoovering. I don't hoover. Currants. Little dried fruit. So they're dried like black currants. They're dried black currants, I think.
Okay, so that was the one I was referring to that we did at sidebar, not in open court. Okay.
Yes.
It's fragmentation. It's N fragmentation.
And I'd like to move NN into evidence at this time.
All I'll say about this, jurors, is that this may be considered graphic. You satisfied with that, Mr. Lessie?
I'm satisfied with that, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Brennan, you satisfied with that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
164.
May I?
All right, they're putting some. Oh, he's got the picture. That's the picture he's going to put into evidence. All right, currants. Okay, currants are, according to AI, refer to two distinct things: dried grapes, called Zante currants, or black Corinth raisins, and the berries of the currant bush. Dried grapes are small seedless raisins often used in baking and are sometimes referred to as Zante currants. Okay. But they're different than raisins. They're not raisins, they're black currants. So black currants are known for their intense, slightly tart flavour, often used in jams, jellies, and other desserts. I just eat them as sweets. That's what they look like. Tesco currants. I can demolish a 500 gram packet of currants. I love them. They're so good.
Yes.
Dr. Scorbello, I'm handing you Exhibit 164 in evidence, and I'm going to also, with the court's permission, have it published on the screen. So whatever one is best for you to look at the screen, please feel free to look at either one. Mr. Wolk, if you could publish 164. Dr. Scorbello, do you recognize 164 as the, well, you describe what 164 is.
This is a picture of the stomach of Mr. O'Keefe after it was removed and opened and the contents were removed. And what you're looking at, this pink red surface, is the mucosa. That's the lining of the stomach. And you had used the word rouille before. These are the folds. The stomach has a lot of folds. And what you can see here are small areas that are redder than everything else. That's hemorrhage, that's blood. And these are the gastric hemorrhages that I described.
Right. So those are what you just showed. There's darker areas. There's just a few of them. That is what you refer to as hemorrhages, correct?
Wisniewski's was correct.
Well, you didn't use Wisniewski's in your report, correct? You referred to them as hemorrhages.
Correct.
Okay. So what I'd like to do now is to, if I may approach, Your Honor,
Yes.
for the chalk.
Exhibit M, ma'am.
And Your Honor, with Your Honor's permission, may I show Dr. Scorbello the chalk that's marked for identification as M?
Yes, and let's see what she answers before we use it for more questions, okay?
Yes. May I hand it to you?
Yes.
Dr. Scorbello, could you please take what's identified as Exhibit M and see if you can identify what that depicts?
Yes, this is a picture of a stomach, again, the mucosa with hemorrhage.
Just hold for these,
Your Honor, can we take a break?
Yes. Yes.
Right, the jury.
I think the jurors were starting to feel somewhat sick. So they ended up with another break. So back to discuss. They had John O'Keefe's stomach up. We'll just listen to a little bit more and then I'm going to call it a day. Because it went round and round and round. It was quite a long discussion that went round and round and round, to be honest.
Could we, with Your Honor's permission, publish simply Mr. O'Keefe's
Yes.
gastric mucosa.
Yes.
Isn't it correct, Dr. Scordi-Bello, that there are much less dark spots in this depiction of the gastric mucosa than there were in the chalk that we just displayed? In other words, that green depiction of what I'll just refer to as a generic stomach. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you can take that down, Mr. Wolf.
David, one of the jurors nearly vomited.
Isn't it correct that for hypothermia in the presence of Wisniewski's ulcers or spots, that you have to have a predominance of the stomach covered by the spots for them to be Wisniewski ulcers?
I think there's different levels and different grades.
In hypothermia, particularly death from hypothermia, wouldn't you expect to see a predominance of those ulcers, meaning they take up most of the stomach lining? Isn't that what you would expect to see?
Not always. I have seen that. I have also seen cases with much fewer spots, as you refer to them.
But isn't the majority of the cases that you have seen where someone has actually died from hypothermia that the ulcers predominate, take up greater than 50% of the stomach?
Yes.
And what percentage of the, and I'm trying to avoid putting it up again. So what percentage of the gastric mucosa of Mr. O'Keefe would you estimate is taken up by the ulcers that you have identified?
I would say somewhere between 10, 15%.
Just 10 and 15%. Thank you. Now, if we could look to the issue of continuing with hypothermia. Let's go to frostbite.
All right. So in relation to the Wisniewskis, what I concluded when I was listening to this as a complete non-expert was maybe John was starting to get the internal signs of hypothermia, because Wisniewski spots, presumably they take some time to develop because they're on the inside of the body, and maybe when he was found and warmed up, he was just starting to get the first signs of severe hypothermia and the development of the Wisniewski spots. So surely they don't just all arrive all at once, do they? They probably develop over a period of time. So I think he was in the beginning stages of showing the internal hypothermic changes. All right, so let's now listen to frostbite, and then I'm going to call it a day because my battery is nearly gone on my laptop.
Note any evidence of frostbite on the deceased, Mr. O'Keefe?
No, I did not.
Do you know what the weather conditions were in Canton, New York? On the
Canton, New York.
Sorry, I keep saying Canton, New York. My apologies.
He said New York a couple of times. He is from New York, so you can understand why.
You know the weather conditions in Canton, Massachusetts, starting at midnight on January 29, 2022, going through 6 a.m. on January 29, 2022.
It was very cold. There was a blizzard coming.
They called it a nor'easter, right?
Correct.
And when you say very cold, in addition to very cold, do you recall whether there were gusty winds?
I believe so.
And do you understand that when there's...
Oh, interesting. Check the surname, and it's an Americanized version of the surname Wisniewski from Poland. Has the word cherry in it. Most people with this surname reside in Texas. Interesting. So it is Polish.
very cold temperature in Fahrenheit, and you add gusty winds, that is called, when you apply the two together, that's called wind chill, right?
Correct.
And with wind chill, doesn't the phenomenon of wind chill mean that the wind combined with the temperature brings the actual temperature down, and in addition to bringing it down, temperature in a wind chill calculation, it also has a physical effect on the body, correct? Wind chill. Doesn't wind chill also cause greater effects than if there was no wind?
Correct.
So in medical terms, the wind synergizes with the temperature and exacerbates the effect on a human.
Correct.
And with a wind chill, isn't it correct that you would have a greater chance of frostbite than if there was no wind chill effect at all?
Yes.
So you saw no signs of frostbite on Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
At the time of my examination and at the time of autopsy, no, I did not.
Did you see frostbite at any other time with regard to Mr. O'Keefe?
I only examined him at the time of autopsy.
So at the only time you examined him, which is at the time of autopsy, you had zero signs of frostbite, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Squirty-Bello, now that you have gone through this part of your examination here today, would you like to amend in any way your opinions as to whether hypothermia was any cause of the death of Mr. O'Keefe?
No, I don't. I still believe that there were hypothermic signs.
Hypothermic signs, correct?
Yes.
I'd like to move to another topic area, please.
I was speaking and I was on mute. Hypothermic signs. I think he was in the initial stages of showing all of the characteristic signs that you would get from hypothermia. I don't think he died from hypothermia. I think he died from his head injury. The reason why his body temperature was so low was because it was cold, really cold. But I'm going to reserve any further judgment until I hear the defense witnesses and see where they're really going with this argument and really why they're really hammering this. You know, he was crossing her a long time on it, and yeah, I'm going to reserve any further judgment, but my battery's on 5%, so I am going to go. I've been on here nearly 3 hours. I'm going to go and listen to Dr. Stonebridge. If it's interesting, I'll come back tomorrow and we can review Dr. Stonebridge's testimony from trial 1, if you would like to, because I don't think I've got anything on tomorrow. What day is it tomorrow? Saturday? I don't think I do. So I could do that. Where do I think he was all night? I don't think he was in the house. I don't. I think he was maybe. If he was in the house, he was potentially in the garage. I think he went in the backyard. I honestly think he was in the backyard. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I could understand why no one saw him in the house if he went in the backyard. And that's where Chloe attacked him. And it means that the people in the house, you know, the ones who were only tangentially related to anything to do with this case, they're telling the truth when they didn't see him in the house. Because he wasn't in the house. He went in the backyard. But then again, we've got Karen telling the media that she saw him going in the house. Now, if he went in the house, he must have gone straight down to the basement, which you can get to from the hallway. The garage is another possibility. There's a side door into the garage. That's another possibility. Now, obviously, the garage would be cold, but yeah, not so cold as in, you know, freezing cold. So I don't honestly know. But my working theory is that Brian Higgins was waiting for him. That's why he's texted him at 20 past 12. Like, are you coming here? Question mark, question mark, question mark. And he was waiting for John and either ushered him through that side gate or perhaps in through the side door of the garage. But the walking, I just find it really interesting that between 12:31 and 56 seconds and 12:32 and 16 seconds, so for 20 seconds he was walking 36 steps, which is 83.5 feet. And it's exactly 83 feet if you walk in a straight line from the curb past the flagpole to the side gate. It's exactly 83 feet, which is, it's one hell of a coincidence. It's one hell of a coincidence. Now, if he went in through that side gate, no one in the house would have seen him. No one in the house would have even known he was there. And if he was led there for however many hours, maybe there was some kind of shelter if it was like down that kind of side bit. So probably not quite as cold as on the lawn. But hypothermia, like he was a big guy, 217 pounds, it takes longer for hypothermia to develop in somebody who's bigger, who's, you know, got some body fat on them. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I'm going to. That's my working theory. That's my working theory. But I'm going to reserve any further discussion on hypothermia until I've heard where the defence is actually going with it properly from their, you know, discussion with their experts. So I shall come back to the topic of John's autopsy once we get to that point in the trial. All right, so I'm going to go. Potentially, I'll be back tomorrow if I want to discuss Dr. Stonebridge. I'm going to go and listen to it and decide whether I want to discuss it. So you may see me tomorrow. You may not, depending on. Go and check out the video on Michelle After Dark if you're following the Lily and Jack Sullivan case, because one of the neighbours has spoken out, so that's interesting. So discuss that. I released that before I went live, so that's been out there for a few hours now. All right, guys. So thank you for joining me. Thank you to the Quiet Observer for the 10 Australian dollars towards the beginning of the stream. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks as always to the mods, and I'll see you soon. Bye, guys.